We don't really celebrate Halloween here in Australia, but when it comes to a good excuse to do something, especially a modelling idea, I'm all in. Dance with the Dead is one of my favourite bands with an appropriate plausible link to Halloween, and given two of their videos feature awesome old cars, I figured I'd make one of my own in theme to the band, of course. To start the project, I first had to figure out what sort of car would suit, something that I could see some sort of skeletal killer cruising around in, looking for their next victim. I couldn't go too muscly because I felt that it really wouldn't work, and modern was entirely out of the question because they're just not scary. And after watching Kiss of the Creatures film clip a couple more times, I really did love the 50s looking beater, which I think is some sort of Chev. For a moment, I did also consider Christine, but that's definitely a bit overplayed and a little too shoehorned. So I opted to try and add a little of her spirit into the build, in the form of working lights and a demonic glow under the hood and inside the cab. Settling on AMT's large-scale 55 Nomad actually took a little while, as I kept changing my mind due to all the variations that I had to choose from. But what made this one final was a couple of things. It's a station wagon, which I've never built one before. And I mean, it's a 50 Chev, so therefore it's badass. Starting off the build, I didn't realise how straightforward this kit was, and kinda just slapped it together, omitting some of the underbody and engine bay sections, as they wouldn't be seen. And as I built and brainstormed, I came up with the idea that a skull would need to be present somewhere on the build. So I set to getting a stencil on the go, electing to tape it on the rear window and coat it with clear, masking off the areas where I didn't want it touched, so that the spray would effectively burn or frost the glass, as you will see later on. Leaving the top half of the motor out, I plan to add two red LEDs in around the carby slot on the manifold, so it would be positioned to the scoop cutout and glow through, giving us that sort of demonic glow that I mentioned earlier. As for the kit itself, a quick note that the details for the rear bumper don't match the instructions or the box, and that's something to be aware of. And the positioning of a few things isn't really clear, so real references of the car are key. Slapping this build together meant a rough final build, which was my goal, and now is probably a good time to point out my goals here. I'm not aiming for a clean build by any means. I want a ratty, rusty, and vibes that match an old horror movie, so overspray, rough sanding, lights front and rear, rust, chips and chunks, misalignments are all welcome. If I can make it seem like it fits when it's complete, then that's a win. Moving on to the paintwork, I saw the box and a couple of real examples had black interiors with the occasional brown one. So I've opted to mix and match and kind of thrown them into a blender together for that sort of Franken look, using Citadel's brown, black and chestnut inks over the top of a lazy coat of German red-brown base. And as for the steering wheel and some sections of metals, I used an old Citadel bolter paint for that dull, faded look of metal. In certain areas, I also tried to leave chrome untouched, so it sort of gives it a bit of a weird look, I guess. What's the blood spattered and smeared here and there, you may ask? My favourite Blood for the Blood God effect by Citadel, which gives the impression of a fresh kill having been recently within the back, along with it continuing onto the driver's door and steering wheel for a little authenticity. Next up was the body, where I shamelessly stole blue from the Kiss of the Creature film clip, because goddamn it fits well with old Chevs. Oh, and before we forget, it's safe to assume that this one has a Ford 9-inch diff because it needs something at least of quality, am I right? Joking, of course, we all know that it's Mopar or no car, if they weren't in a million pieces all the time, due to constantly being broken. But anyway, jokes aside, I did a few layers of various Citadel blues to build up the coats into a faded dulled finish with the intention of rusting most of the one side and a little of the other places. This was mostly an experimental process that I mucked around with a bit before settling on what I kind of liked out of the ideas, then headed onto a white top roof with chrome window surrounds. Simply base coating the roof with German grey and the chrome with SMS Jet Black, I moved into SMS Hyperchrome and white for the roof and surrounds finished colours, and then I headed on to the rust. Rust has to be one of my favourite parts of builds. There's something cool about old heaps that have been eaten away and sitting, or just neglected and filled with metallic cancer, perhaps taking a good story to condemnation with them, and I know I've heard a few good ones before. Anyhow, using AK Interactive's track rust and rust streaks, I panel lined all of her sections lazily to ensure it was rough, before I fitted her with the desired appearance. Finally, a bit of mud pigment to wear the rubber tyres and rims a bit when I finish up at the final detailing. The LEDs. This was a purely experimental section, so the wiring is super sloppy and loose, but I'm glad to know that it works for the future. I used warm white for the headlights and standard red for the taillights, weaving and linking them through the underbody sections to make a junction, which was linked to 2 AAA batteries and a case I snuck on the bottom of the chassis. They look decent enough, so I'll consider that a goal achieved. And for now, enjoy the process. Alrighty, that's about it for now. If you're a fan of the music, be sure to check out Dance with the Dead. I listened to a few of their albums while I was working on this project. Until next time, take it easy and happy Halloween.